the shadowed halls of the Byzantine Empire, sunlight refracted off gold mosaics and marble floors, reflecting into the intricate silk draperies that hid the city's secrets. Constantinople, a city of splendor and vice, harbored wonders and horrors in equal measure. Among its denizens, one woman would rise from utter degradation to command absolute power, the Empress Theodora Augusta. Her life was a study in extremes, from public humiliation to imperial domination, from sexual exploitation to psychological mastery. Every corner of the city seemed complicit in her transformation, every whisper and glance a step in her ascent. Theodora was born in 500 AD, the daughter of Acacius, a bearkeeper in the Hippodrome's Green faction. Her family occupied a precarious position on the fringes of society, their lives intertwined with the chariot races, the roar of the crowd, and the corruption that permeated even minor offices. When Acacius died suddenly, her family's fragile support system crumbled. Her mother, desperate and cunning, guided Theodora and her sisters into Constantinople's darkest theaters, where theatrical performance and sexual exploitation were indistinguishable. By her early teens, Theodora had learned the hard truths: that beauty could be weaponized, desire commodified, and bodies controlled. The Hippodrome was not merely a place of sport. It was a crucible of spectacle, politics, and vice. Here, up to 100,000 citizens gathered to witness chariot races, brutal entertainments, and performances that blurred morality. Theodora, barely 13, became a fixture in productions so grotesque that modern audiences would shudder. According to Procopius, she would lie nearly nude on stage, ribbons barely covering her, while trained geese pecked barley from her body. The grotesque parody of swans in swansong theater playing out before enthralled and horrified spectators. By 522 AD, Theodora returned to Constantinople a transformed woman. She traded the theaters for modest dwellings near the palace, spinning wool rather than surrendering her body. Yet her mind remained honed by years of observing vice and desire. She spoke multiple languages, debated theology, and remembered the smallest scandals of all who mattered in the city. When she caught the eye of Justinian, heir to the throne, it was not chance. It was deliberate positioning. She understood proximity to power required patience, calculation, and a mastery of perception. Their courtship was secretive, loaded with intelligence and seduction. Justinian, aware of her past but recognizing her strategic genius, pursued her. Byzantine law forbade men of senatorial rank from marrying actresses, yet Justinian's ambition outweighed convention. He saw in Theodora not only a woman, but a partner who understood power's architecture, the manipulation of perception, the weaponization of desire, the orchestration of compliance. When Justin ascended in 527 AD, Theodora became Augusta. The girl once degraded in the Hippodrome now orchestrated submission. Court rituals reversed roles. Senators prostrated themselves, kissing her feet while she remained seated on a throne of purple and gold. The network of women she had rescued from prostitution became her eyes and ears throughout Constantinople, a web of intelligence born from sexualized domination and loyalty, extracted through survival. Eunuchs and attendants, transformed under her supervision, became instruments of obedience. Her personal chambers housed both forbidden pleasures and sanctuaries for former performers. Here, desire and control intertwined. Women who had once performed for survival now reported secrets to Theodora. Young men and courtiers became complicit in her web of psychological and sexual mastery. Every ritual, every intimate inti. After the Nika riots, Theodora's power was absolute, but her methods were subtle, terrifying, and pervasive. The palace itself became a stage where every corridor, chamber, and balcony reflected her authority. Courtiers moved as if in a carefully choreographed dance, their gestures, attire, and expressions all scrutinized for signs of weakness or loyalty. Theodora's eyes missed nothing. She observed men whispering, women glancing furtively, eunuchs awaiting instruction, all potential instruments or liabilities. Her understanding of human desire and shame had evolved into a precise science of empire-wide control. In private chambers, Theodora conducted rituals that blended sexuality, mysticism, and psychological dominance. Young women and boys were brought into rooms scented with exotic oils and incense, mirrors reflecting endless repetitions of ceremonial acts, some playful, some coercive. These acts were simultaneously punishments, lessons, and instruments of influence, conditioning all who entered her presence to respond according to her design. She had transformed the trauma of her youth into a meticulously controlled framework of obedience. Her influence extended into the city itself. The prostitutes of Constantinople became her intelligence network. Former rivals, women she had rescued, or performers she had trained, reported every scandal, every secret liaison, and every act of impropriety. Noble families, aware of Theodora's reach, often bribed or obeyed her decrees. Her power was both feared and desired. She controlled access to sexual and social capital, ensuring that desire became submission, that fascination became loyalty. The Emperor Justinian, though powerful, increasingly relied on Theodora's counsel. She manipulated debates, influenced laws, and guided military strategy, often subtly contradicting his public statements, while secretly coordinating every AI. Her domestic rituals were elaborate and highly sexualized. Theodora maintained chambers of infinite reflection and sensory manipulation, mirrors multiplying actions, perfumes masking natural scents, soft music guiding movement, silk drapery brushing skin. Young attendants performed endless choreographies of service and seduction, trained to anticipate her desires, to respond without hesitation, and to report observations to her ever-expanding intelligence network. Every act reinforced her supremacy, every performance a tool of governance. Theodora's network extended beyond the palace. Convents she founded for former prostitutes combined salvation with control. Women who had survived sexual exploitation were now instruments of observation and loyalty, constrained by ritual, instruction, and obligation. These sanctuaries became centers of both protection and psychological subjugation, blending her desire to liberate with an inescapable need to dominate. Her influence on the empire's legal framework was profound. She championed laws protecting women from forced prostitution and ensuring rights in divorce, yet simultaneously used sexualized accusations to remove political enemies. She weaponized societal taboos, desire, shame, and the appearance of immorality to consolidate her authority, demonstrating that sexual knowledge was a more potent tool than armies or edicts. The rituals of court extended into the sacred and profane. Secret gatherings blended Christian liturgy with sexualized ceremonies, binding participants through shared transgression and fear. Religious leaders, hoping to maintain influence, became beholden to her, manipulated through guilt, desire, and carefully orchestrated scandal. Every ceremony served dual purposes: pleasure and control. Her mastery of the interplay between sexuality, faith, and politics became unmatched in history. Theodora's treatment of her family mirrored her approach to governance. Her daughter, trained in the arts of seduction and manipulation, became a living extension of her mother's strategic mind. Former victims of exploitation were molded into agents of her empire. She transformed trauma into a meticulously controlled instrument of power, ensuring that no weakness went unobserved, no desire unmonitored, and no loyalty untested. Even the Nika aftermath influenced her sexualized strategies. The hippodrome, once a stage for her humiliation, became an instrument of terror, spectacle, and obedience. Courtiers, soldiers, and citizens alike were reminded that power could transform the suffering of the past into domination over the present. Her psychological strategies now combined with physical authority, making Theodora a master of both spectacle and control. A ruler who understood the erotic and the political as one continuous plane of influence. The palace itself became a labyrinth of observation. Hidden passageways, surveillance points, and private chambers allowed Theodora to monitor desires, punish disloyalty, and orchestrate seduction. Every object, from the arrangement of furniture to the placement of mirrors, was designed to remind courtiers of their dependence upon her favor. Every meeting, every ritual, every glance carried significance in her web of dominance. Her influence over the Emperor Justinian was subtle, sexualized, and strategic. She guided policy with a mixture of seduction and coercion, maintaining a delicate balance of public disagreement and private coordination. She leveraged intimacy to shape decisions, ensuring that even the emperor's power flowed through the channels she controlled. Her genius lay in making desire a form of obedience, making loyalty inseparable from sexual and psychological entanglement. Court intrigues were orchestrated with military precision. She trapped rivals through sexualized liaisons, orchestrated humiliations, and meticulous observation. Young men and women became instruments, their desires and fears documented, exploited, and ultimately used to remove threats. Theodora had transformed personal trauma into an empire-wide strategy, weaponizing sexuality, observation, and psychological manipulation as instruments of governance. Her religious interventions were equally strategic, protecting monophysites, manipulating church officials, and blending sexualized ritual with theological disputes. Theodora controlled loyalty through desire, fear, and perceived sanctity. She demonstrated that mastery over human desire was often more potent than divine authority or military might, ensuring that the spiritual elite became subservient to her designs. The palace became a space where gender, power, and desire intersected in ways unimaginable. Male courtiers feminized, women militarized, eunuchs perfected as instruments, every individual a player in her orchestrated drama. Her mastery of these dynamics extended to every chamber, every gathering, every ritual. Psychological dominance, sexualized surveillance, and ceremonial obedience converged into a seamless instrument of control. Theodora's methods extended to mundane and intimate interactions alike. Every conversation, every meeting, every gesture was calculated. Desire, shame, pleasure, and fear were mapped, measured, and leveraged. Courtiers who misstepped faced subtle or overt punishments. Those who excelled were rewarded with influence, access, or intimacy. The empire itself was an instrument of performance, and Theodora the ultimate director. By the middle of her reign, Theodora had perfected the transformation of trauma into dominance. She controlled armies, laws, religious hierarchies, and the desires of her court with equal skill. Sexual knowledge, psychological insight, and strategic observation allowed her to remain untouchable. Her influence ensured that loyalty, obedience, and fear were inseparable, cementing her legacy as the most sexually and psychologically powerful empress in Byzantine history. As Theodora entered her final decade, her rule was increasingly defined by ritual, spectacle, and the meticulous control of desire. She became reclusive, emerging only at carefully timed audiences or ceremonial events. Her beauty rituals grew obsessive. Daily baths in milk, oils from distant lands, and rare minerals promised the illusion of immortality. Even in private, she maintained surveillance over courtiers, eunuchs, and attendants, ensuring that every glance, word, and gesture reflected absolute obedience. The empire itself seemed to bend to her schedule, her rituals dictating the rhythm of life in Constantinople. Her obsession with control extended to her closest allies. Eunuchs were perfected into instruments of absolute loyalty, while women trained as administrators, warriors, and spies executed her commands without hesitation. Every participant in her court, regardless of gender, was subject to sexualized observation and psychological testing. Courtiers who faltered faced public humiliation or private torment. Those who excelled were rewarded with influence, wealth, or intimate access. The palace had become a living organism, breathing at her command, pulsating with desire, fear, and reverence. Theodora's daughter, groomed for power, became both a reflection of her mother's genius and a tool of empire. Trained in seduction, manipulation, and psychological observation, she extended Theodora's influence beyond the immediate court. Former prostitutes, transformed into intelligence agents, reported every scandal and misstep, maintaining the Empress's omniscient presence, even when she was physically absent. This intricate web ensured that Theodora's control extended from the palace to the streets of Constantinople, from noble families to religious authorities. Even religious rituals were manipulated. Secret gatherings, blending sexualized ceremonies with theological discussion, created bonds of complicity and fear. Clergy who might have challenged her were entangled in acts of transgression and observation. Her mastery of desire as a tool of political leverage allowed her to dominate spiritual, secular, and intimate spheres simultaneously. She transformed sexuality into governance, shame into authority, and observation into absolute power. Her legislative impact mirrored her personal strategies. Laws protecting women from forced prostitution, enhancing divorce rights, and punishing sexual crimes were balanced by political purges executed through the weaponization of sexual scandal. Desire became a form of compliance, sexual knowledge a tool of manipulation, and fear a method of loyalty extraction. Theodora's genius lay in her ability to integrate trauma, eroticism, and politics into a single instrument of empire-wide control. Her final years were marked by paranoia and ritualized behavior. She constructed underground chambers beneath the palace for retreat from imagined threats, conducted surveillance on even her most trusted attendants, and continued her obsessive beauty and hygiene practices. She tested loyalty through extreme demands, ensuring that submission was never assumed, only earned through obedience, fear, or desire. Every act of devotion became a performance, every gesture of rebellion a lesson in the consequences of defiance. When illness struck, Theodora faced it with calculated composure. Physicians and attendants noted her meticulous preparations, letters dictating the protection of allies, instructions for the continuation of her charitable institutions, and destruction of documents that might compromise her legacy. Even in the face of death, she maintained control, performing her role as Empress to the very end, ensuring the empire and her memory would continue to reflect her absolute mastery. Her death in 548 AD, likely from cancer, though some suspected poison, left Justinian isolated, surrounded by reminders of the Empress who had dominated him, the court, and the empire itself. Constantinople mourned a ruler who had reshaped power into something simultaneously seductive, terrifying, and absolute. The Empress's body was interred with ceremony, yet her influence persisted in the palace, the laws, and the rituals she had established. Theodora's legacy was a paradox of liberation and control. Convents for former prostitutes, laws protecting women, and institutions she founded reflected her desire to protect and elevate. Yet these same systems were tools of submission, surveillance, and psychological domination. She transformed personal trauma into political authority, sexual knowledge into instruments of statecraft, and human desire into mechanisms of empire. Survivors and successors alike navigated a world shaped by her mastery of both pleasure and fear. The empire continued, yet it never produced a ruler quite like Theodora. Her methods were unparalleled, trauma transformed into strategy, sexuality into obedience, observation into omnipotence. Courtiers, eunuchs, women, and clergy remained enmeshed in her legacy of control. Their desires, fears, and loyalty intertwined with the mechanisms she had perfected. She proved that survival in a system built on exploitation might require mastering and reproducing the very forces that had once subjugated you. Her psychological imprint extended far beyond her life. Theodora demonstrated that those who had endured the deepest humiliation possessed unique insights into the structures of desire, power, and obedience. By turning degradation into a tool of dominance, she reshaped the empire's political and social hierarchies, ensuring that power respected no origin, but the will and cunning to seize it. Her life became a study in the alchemy of trauma and authority. Theodora Augusta, once the daughter of a bearkeeper, once humiliated on the hippodrome stage, became a force that transcended morality, gender, and expectation. She transformed every act of degradation she had suffered into instruments of empire-wide domination. She wielded sexuality, fear, and psychological insight with unparalleled mastery, leaving a legacy that endures not only in history, but in the very mechanisms of power that define human civilization. Her story is horrifying, magnificent, and undeniably human, a testament to the capacity for transformation, survival, and absolute domination.